What is up everyone, Dimitri2 here and welcome back to another video. Now this video is going to be about my top 5 Warframes for newer players. Most of this list will come down to a mixture of accessibility, farmability and most importantly how each frame performs when you have no or very little mods equipped. Now keep in mind that this is my opinion and yours might differ, but I'll explain why I've chosen each of the frames that I have. Before we start though with the list, I want to mention one major thing. Warframe as a game is all about changing frames up for each mission. There are plenty of different missions and different goals and approaches to each mission as well, and as such there is no such thing as a best frame. People have their favorites for their own reasons and each frame does well in certain things compared to the other frames, but there is not a single frame that outshines every other frame in the game everywhere. However, with this many missions and frames in the game, it can be a bit overwhelming for newer players to choose from which frame they want, and that's why I made this video. Hopefully this will guide you a bit more in choosing which frames you want to farm for first to help make the rest of the grinds easier. So without further ado, let's get on with the list. Now choosing a number 5 for this list was pretty difficult as there are plenty of frames and a lot of them are very useful for beginners in different ways. However, I ended up choosing Volt for my number 5 as he has a bunch of stuff going for him that makes him useful for newer players. Not only is he one of the 3 frames that you can choose straight away from the start of the game, but he also scales into endgame really well. Combine that with his ability to kill and CC early on in the game when you don't have any mods available to you, and you have one solid starting frame in my opinion. Later on in the mid game he transforms into one of the best speedrunning frames for missions like Capture, and once you hit endgame you can expect Volt to play a major role in stuff like Tridolons as well. To be fair, he is a little squishy, but I'd say his advantages, his killing and his early game CC, more than make up for it. Number 4. Now my number 4 on the list is Necrose. Necrose's third ability, Desecrate, causes enemy corpses to drop additional loot. And this, in my opinion, makes him the best frame in the game for farming resources, which is something new players will need plenty of. This ability alone, Desecrate, already makes him insanely strong for this list, not to mention the rest of his kit is pretty decent as well. The reason he is number 4 however, and not any higher up, is because of his accessibility and build potential. He is farmed from Orc and Derelict Assassinate missions, and along with a decently pricey mod build to get him up and running, I'd consider him more of a frame that you should get towards the end of your beginning stages, or like the early mid-game stages. If you haven't unlocked Saturn or Uranus yet, I would not recommend farming for this frame just yet. Overall, he's a very good frame, but he's not very accessible for beginners just yet. As good as he is, it takes a bit of time to get him, so number 4 for Necrose. The frame that claims the number 3 spot on my list is none other than Nova. Now Nova is farmed relatively early on from the boss in Europa, and although they are difficult to kill, for newer players especially, the frame is definitely worth it. Every single one of her abilities is just straight up strong. Her 4th ability, Molecular Prime, applies a debuff on enemies in a large radius around you that gives you double damage against them, makes them explode on death, and either slows them down, speeds them up, or anything in between depending on how much power strength you are using on her. Her 1st ability gives you some damage reduction as well, your 2nd ability gives you some good damage, and your 3rd ability gives you some much needed mobility on her. Her builds in the beginning stages of the game are incredibly easy, as the main thing you just want to do on her is stack as much power duration on her as you can find, and thankfully power duration is one of the easier stats to find mods for as well. Overall, her ability to CC makes her an incredibly strong frame, and her accessibility and build availability make her a solid choice for any player in any kind of mission really. Nova just works kind of everywhere. She's a really good frame. Now the number 2 on this list is going to be Rhino. Rhino is a very tanky frame, and early on in the game basically gives you God mode at the cost of 50 energy. It is ridiculous how strong he is without any mods or any investment needed. His accessibility is amazing as well, as he is literally the first frame that you can farm from on the star chart, his blueprints being a reward for killing the boss on Venus. His early game potential is through the roof, with his 2nd ability, Iron Skin, giving you a substantial buffer of extra health, which also makes you immune to status effects while the buffer is active. Even without any mods, Iron Skin gives you plenty of health to survive almost everything on the star chart without too much difficulty. His scalability into the end game is also very good, with either an Iron Skin build making you incredibly tanky in late game, a Roar build giving you extra damage to you and all nearby allies, or a Stomp build allowing you to CC entire maps at a time. Everything about Rhino makes him a god tier starting frame, with only really two downsides that I can think of. One is that without any mods or endgame builds, he is a very selfish frame, relying mostly on his iron skin to do all the heavy lifting until you can get his other builds up and running, and not really playing for objectives or supporting the team in any way. If you play an iron skin Rhino early on in the game, you're playing for you and not for anyone else. And the second downside is that in my opinion, he is too forgiving. He doesn't really teach new players how to mod properly or how to survive without thousands of extra HP protecting them. And learning how to survive on your own in Warframe, especially with some of the squishier frames, is a skill that you're gonna have to pick up over time. Iron Skin Rhino kinda prevents you from learning that. However, even with that said, Rhino is just an early game god. His accessibility, modability and scaling into the endgame are really good. So if you haven't already picked him up and you're struggling to get through the early game a bit, pick yourself up a Rhino. It's a really strong frame. Now, with me having talked up Rhino for the number 2 spot that much, it's going to be really difficult to match that expectation. And yet, for me, there's really only one frame that takes the number 1 spot, almost undisputed. And that frame is Frost. Frost is acquired a little later in the game than Rhino, being a reward from killing the bosses in series. His tankiness, although not bad, does not compare even close to Rhino's iron skin. And yet, the reason Frost is on number 1 is because of one ability, and that's his third ability, his Snow Globe. Snow Globe creates a large bubble of ice that has a few thousand HP by default, and lasts until it is destroyed or removed by Frost using his first ability on it. It also pushes out any enemy inside of the bubble's range the moment Frost creates a new Snow Globe. This ability is so damn good for beginners, it's not even funny. One of the biggest walls that I think new players hit in this game is around Uranus, Neptune, somewhere around there, when they can keep themselves alive, but not so much the objectives. Whether that's a defense objective, a mobile defense, excavation, or anything of the sort. The moment an objective comes into play around those levels, new players find themselves caught out and just struggling to complete them and protect them properly. And this is where Frost shines. His ability to protect objectives is arguably the best one in the game, and his CC is also really good, along with decent AoE damage potential on him as well. He's not exactly the most tanky frame out there, but can stand on his own for a few hits at the very least. His ability to cheese certain enemies by slamming them into the wall over and over again with his third ability is also highly underrated at times. On both of my Iron Man accounts, Frost is by far and away my most used frame, because of the aforementioned reasons. He is just really that good for a solo account. He does most things well and is absolutely exceptional in objective control. Without a doubt, Frost is the number 1 frame in the game for any new players in my opinion. Honestly, Frost is the one Warframe in the entire game that I recommend everyone picks up on levels. No matter if you're a beginner or a veteran, his bubble is just that damn good. Pick it up. Now to finish off this video, I would like to add in 2 honorable mentions that fell short just outside the top 5. And those are Mesa and Mag. Now Mesa is really good at killing most bosses in this game, taking down some of the strongest bosses and enemies within seconds. Sadly, her accessibility is really bad, being available after a quest and then having to farm Mutalist Alat-V nav coordinates, turning those into keys, and then running those keys over and over hoping to get lucky for getting that one part that you still need for her. Also, her builds are pretty damn expensive mod-wise, so she's a really good frame and I would have really liked to include Mesa on this list, but she's just not there for beginners. If you're a beginner and you want Mesa, go ahead, farm for her. She's a very strong frame, I can tell you that much. She will not disappoint. But just because of her mod build being very expensive and her accessibility being really bad, I had to exclude her out of this list. Now the other one that I mentioned, Mag, I think is also personally up there, because unlike what some people think, she's not completely garbage and can actually perform as some sort of like budget Mesa when it comes to killing certain bosses. Zanuka and Alat-V particularly come to mind, with her bullet attractor making these fights really easy, and that can be finished within seconds sometimes, even at sortie levels. I occasionally take my Mag with me to an Alat-V assassinate mission, take a Mag, bullet attractor both of them, shoot a Mara Detron into it, and they're dead within like a second or two. It's really good. Sadly, Mag is also really squishy and for most of the star chart really doesn't do that well, so she also fell short out of this list. I think that Volt makes a lot better of a starter, is a lot more all-round survivable, better CC, better damage, Mag works as sort of like a boss assassin, but that is about it. And there you have it, folks. That's the end of the video. Now, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for more of this kind of content in the future. Check out my Twitch channel in the description below, as I am mainly a Twitch streamer. And as always, I hope to see you guys in the next video. And until then, peace.